Yes, good morning. You're very welcome to Thursday mornings Off the Ball AM, OTB AM, myself, Dave McIntyre, joined by Eoin Sheehan and Alan Quinlan this morning. Lads, how are you? You're very welcome to this morning's show. If you're watching us either on our YouTube channel, or on Periscope, or indeed offtheball.com, you're very welcome. Thanks for making us a part of your Thursday morning. A lot to get through today. We are going to look at rugby. We're going to be talking about everything that's going on in the world of sport this morning. Look ahead to the weekend as well. It's a huge weekend on Off the Ball with our live sports. We've got the Champions League to talk about, one of the worst Champions Leagues we can recall for quite some time in terms of the final round of fixtures. We've also got Thursday's back pages. Myself, Eoin and Alan will be discussing them. Gordon D'Arcy is going to join Alan for a lot of rugby chat later in the day. A lot of little stories doing the rounds over the course of the week. And then, of course, we've got massive games on Off the Ball in the Champions Cup this weekend, round 3 of the Champions Cup pool stages. We'll have another look at the sports pages in a little more detail later in the show. We'll be talking doping in football the week that it was in terms of FIFA, the World Cup draw, and, of course, the confirmation that the Russian Olympics team have been banned from next year's Winter Games. And we'll be talking about Shay Given and his views on Stan as well. So a lot to talk about over the next hour and a little bit. You're very welcome, Alan. Thanks for joining us. I haven't seen you since you came back from your holidays. 2 weeks off. Yeah, exactly. I think we covered this in depth yesterday. Well, I won't go into it, but it's the first time I've seen you. Thank you very much. You look relaxed, as if you're ready to tackle the Christmas season. That's it, you know. I think my relaxation will just wear out just in time as the Christmas break kicks in, so I've timed it perfectly, you know. Where did you go? So I did a little bit of Belgium and a little bit of Germany. I think we established the whole Hamburg leg of the tour yesterday, where I don't think Ger did me a great service by putting up the picture of a certain nightclub that I was in that had 0 closing hours. So I appreciate that, Ger, if you're watching. You discovered the 24-hour nightclub. Yeah, but inadvertently, let's just say. But that's as far as I'll go on that story. I think. Well, you just look at your watch and you realise it's 8:30 and you just don't know where the time is going. Yeah, let's go at 8:30 instead of the fact that, say, Sky Sports Premier League coverage was kicking off in the corner of the room. Let's go at 8:30, yeah. Lads, talk to me about your thoughts on the Champions League. I know you're a bit of a Pool fan, Quinny, so you would have been pretty happy with their second of their 7-0 hammerings of an opponent in the group stages last night. Yeah. Pretty impressive. Hat-trick for Coutinho on the night that he captained the team. But all in all, I was involved in commentaries last night and the night before. I can't recall a more dull final group there's no fixtures. Competitive games. There was no edge to them as regards. Liverpool had to win at home, obviously. They needed a point, but to win 7-0 was phenomenal. Just saying to Eoin, their front three is as good as anyone really, and possibly in Europe. The problem is the defence. You look at who they'd possibly get. They could get, the teams that jump out in the last 16: Bayern Munich, Real Madrid. The others, you probably think Juventus. Better be not disrespectful to Juventus. Wouldn't want them either. But they have a tough situation going into the last 16. But going forward, some of the goals last night were phenomenal. Defensively is the issue in the Premier League, but it was a big win for them, big statement, and when they play together and get that kind of confidence, they look electric going forward. But yeah, as you say, it wasn't a great night of competitive matches. Well, there were so many groups that were. City were already out, already qualified. Yeah. They lost. Well, if any of our viewers or indeed our listeners on our audio stream are only just getting themselves out of the lab and haven't heard the results last night, there was a bit of interest in the game involving Celtic because they needed to take something, obviously, the previous night. But last night's games involving the Premier League sides, as Alan said, Liverpool were the only side that really needed anything. They just needed a point to make sure they went through. They won 7-0, sharing the goals out between Coutinho. Salah got one, Mane got a couple, and Firmino got one as well. Spartak Moscow were terrible in that game at Anfield. Besiktas, they topped their group. They beat RB Leipzig. Napoli went down to a late winner in Rotterdam, losing to Feyenoord. It means Napoli drop into what is looking like an incredibly competitive last 32 round of the Europa League. Tottenham beat Apoel Nicosia 3-0 in a game at Wembley that had just over 40,000 spectators at it. Apoel definitely needed a result, but ultimately they just didn't have anything to really trouble Tottenham. Real Madrid won in Madrid against Dortmund, so it's Dortmund that drop into the Europa League as we knew, and Porto hammering Monaco by 5-2. It's been an incredible Champions League group stage for the Premier League teams. Obviously, 5 came into it, given that Manchester United won the Europa League last season. 4 of them have topped their group. Chelsea will fancy the chances against most teams. And maybe the tide is turning after a fairly barren run of seasons where the Premier League teams weren't a factor in the Champions League. It's coming around again, perhaps. It's incredible how quickly these things can turn, that you have this overall view that, the Premier League is terrible once it comes up against the elite European opposition. Like, it's almost reminiscent of this time last year in the Champions Cup in rugby, that suddenly the Irish
Irish provinces are all doing unbelievably well in their pools. It feels a little bit reminiscent of that this season, where I think this is the first time ever that 5 teams from one nation have qualified to the last 16 of the European Cup, which is some achievement, but it's not, well, I say it's some achievement. It's what you would expect, given the amount of money that these teams are spending. Like, I think the greatest example of how powerful money really is in this competition and what it represents is that Monaco result last night, and how terrible they've been since they've been fleeced after last season's brilliant run in the Champions League. That money really does talk. That each of those 5 teams do expect to go through. On that Liverpool point, though, can they go on and win the whole thing? I would actually almost say that the last 16 tie could be the banana skin here. That I would fancy Liverpool against any other team who's got more possession than Liverpool, which is likely to happen if they get a tough draw in the quarter-final and beyond. But if they're getting a second seed, which they will, in the last 16, and they get a Basel-type team, that's a sort of 2-legged tie over 180 minutes that Liverpool could easily slip up in. But give them Juventus or something like that, and you would fancy Liverpool big time, even over 180 minutes.
Yeah, against one of the bigger teams, I would fancy them more. I agree with Eoin. I think,
even with the attacking talent they have, and the manner in which, in particular in the Premier League in the last month, they have started to sweep aside these lower-ranking teams, and the manner in which they went to Stoke, hammered them. They had a big win at Brighton last weekend.
They're doing the
kind of
opposite
results
this year, aren't they? They're losing against the bigger teams and winning against the
like
weaker
if they end
ones.
up against a Roma, for example, I would absolutely expect them to go through comfortably over the 2 legs, given the firepower that they have. If they end up against a really top side, like
they signed someone in January,
Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, I think Liverpool will struggle.
If they strengthen their defence in January, I was listening.
As in, if they sign Virgil van Dijk.
Yeah, well, he's not playing too well. He looks totally disinterested.
I saw him last weekend, and he was very good.
Yeah,
Bournemouth.
that was probably his first decent one. He's been poor from. But I was interested. I was listening to Damien Duff last night, and he said they're dark horses, and I always get a little tetchy when I hear that about Liverpool. But they are. They could beat anyone on their day. The space, the pace they have, the way they're creating goals, and Salah is just an incredible player. But
last night
ultimately, when it comes down to defensively, I think they'll be.
Yeah, I think it's crucial if they sign somebody in January, for example. I certainly wouldn't want to be relying on Dejan Lovren and Ragnar Klavan, for example.
But you look at Chelsea and you think they can only play Paris Saint-Germain, Barcelona or Besiktas. So there's 3 there, but there's 2 powerhouses in Paris Saint-Germain with all the money they have. Barcelona. I always judge the Champions League on how powerful Barcelona and Real Madrid are. I don't know, am I wrong to do that? But when you see their results, how powerful they are, and they're not kind of in that same bracket as they have been. There's a bit of transition going on in both clubs.
It would appear to be extremely open now as we go into the knockout stages. Who, in your mind, Eoin, who's the favourite to lift the trophy in May?
It's Manchester City. For me, I think they're the best team in Europe right now. As you say, I think the competition is weakened a little bit by virtue of the fact that Barcelona and Real Madrid are both weakened themselves. But you look at previous seasons and how Ronaldo just picked Real Madrid up and just led them to the Champions League, not single-handedly, but he was obviously...
I think if a Barcelona or Real Madrid are in the quarter-finals, semi-finals, muscle memory, history, all that stuff kicks in. Getting it right on the night, getting a few guys back from injury, all that stuff makes a difference, because when you have that experience of being in the big stage, you can kind of sometimes turn it on. So I think if they're in the mix, they could be potential winners. But City are probably the team to beat. And it's interesting, Guardiola will probably be freaking after losing that game against Shakhtar last night. They'd gone 28 matches unbeaten.
But the thing is, by losing that game last night, they have inadvertently knocked Napoli out of the competition, Manchester City. So I would say Pep Guardiola is kind of okay with all of that. I'm not being a conspiracy theorist here, but he didn't look too animated or too angry. Manchester City were definitely trying, though. They created a number of opportunities and probably should have drawn the game. And I see the Shakhtar manager dressed up as Zorro after the match, because he promised that if they managed to get out of that group, that in their perspective would have been a group of death, he would have dressed up as Zorro, and he did that in the post-match press conference, which I'm always a bit suspicious of, because he must have brought the mask and the hat with him to the game, so he must have expected to get through. But no, I would say Manchester City are definitely favourites. The thing, though, obviously, is in terms of Liverpool's perspective, if they lose Philippe Coutinho, I think their chances of winning this thing are over. But if he goes to Barcelona, he'll be cup tied, won't be able to play for Barcelona in the competition. So it's not like if Barcelona...
It's not going anywhere, excuse me.
I would have thought it's highly unlikely he's going to leave in January.
Well, the point I was just trying to make there is that if he does, it's not like it's strengthening Barcelona to the point where they will suddenly become this force again. That I do think Barcelona are beatable this season, and this is the big chance for the English teams.
Yeah, I think for me, might be Manchester City as well if I was going to pick a winner because of their manager, and he's been there and done that. Paris Saint-Germain I still have doubts over mentally, although the addition of Neymar is absolutely a massive one for them. But I would fear Bayern Munich if I was any of the teams in the group that have won their pool or won their group this time around, because Bayern Munich obviously finished second to PSG. They beat PSG 3-1 in the last game of the group stages. Jopenka seems to have got them back on an even keel, although in the Bundesliga they haven't shown exactly great form over the last 3 or 4 weeks. It's just fortunate for them, the teams behind them haven't made any inroads. But I can't recall going into the last 16 in Champions League that was as open as this. There's always one real standout team. I don't think that we haven't mentioned Tottenham who pretty much just have the Champions League to concentrate on now. Yeah,
it's unbelievable. They've played so well. They can play either Basel, Bayern Munich, Juventus, Sevilla or Shakhtar Donetsk or Porto. So there's no one in there, I think, Bayern and Juventus. I think they can definitely get into...
None of those teams will want to draw Tottenham.
Yeah, they wouldn't. And the results, the performance against, both performances against Real Madrid. And I think, their league is strange that they're not going as good in the league. But
what about Manchester United?
Of course, they have a Jose Mourinho team can beat anybody. But I'm just starting to think here, we're listing off all these teams and the chances that they have. Like you alluded to it there, is it actually the weakest Champions League we've had this decade because of the fact that we don't have...
I think it's more evenly spread. So I think in the knockout stages and the last 16, whatever, you'll have better games because the intrigue of who's going to win it, it's the same in rugby that you have one or two, it's Clermont and Saracens for the last couple of years and you think nobody can...
So do you judge a competition to be very strong because there are two teams that nobody else can get near?
Well, that's what I'm pondering. Is it a better competition because you get a wide spread?
We'll see it in the last 16.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. But I think this group stage has actually been very entertaining, bar the last couple of nights. I think last season, by round 4, round 5, a lot of the groups had already wrapped up. And at least this year we had it going all the way to round 5 in most groups. And that BT Sport goal show this season was just entertainment beyond belief. Literally the best, I think the best sporting theatre at home near couch was the BT Sports Goals show, probably week 2, 3 direction. Just unbelievable. The amount of goals scored was sensational. Liverpool scored more goals in this group stage than they did the last time they won the Champions League. You've had Cristiano Ronaldo becoming the first ever player to score in every single group match, setting a record in that respect. And I think Spurs becoming the best, setting the best ever points tally for an English team in the group stage of the Champions League as well, surpassing Arsenal's record when they went to the final and lost to Barcelona. So there's been a number of records set. So that would suggest that the standard is higher than ever. But whenever I see that there's an even playing field, the cynic in me thinks maybe this competition just isn't as strong as it was over the past couple of years.
See, that in no way would that bother me. For me, the Premier League is the best league in Europe, not because of the quality of the players.
Sure.
A lot of most of the absolutely best players, elite players in world football are probably playing in Germany or Spain at the moment. For me, it's because at the start of the season, you could sit down and make a cogent argument for maybe 5 or 6 teams to win the title. You can't do that in any other top league in Europe. You'd struggle to come up with 2 in the vast majority of the leagues. 1, if you're looking at the Bundesliga, for example. And I think you could throw a blanket over 6, 7 teams in the last 16 and make an argument for them winning the competition.
That'll make it good, and the draw's on Monday, and I think when you get the draw, then that bit of excitement will kick in, and you'll be looking at fixtures saying, who's going to go through here? And that
there's going to be a lot of 50-50 ties.
Yeah, there is, I think, and I think that will make it better. It'll probably be, as regards, there is question marks of the quality and how strong. That's probably because Madrid and Barcelona are not as
come back to the
powerful
pack
and dominant.
And, Real, if they won 4 and 5, that would be incredible. We're going to get stuck into this morning's back pages. Owen, you're going to kick us off the Irish Independent?
Yeah, we'll start with the Indo because on the back page it says Montpellier lineup standard. It's the latest rugby story today. It's Rory O'Connor and Cian Tracy with the story this morning saying big spenders ready to test IRFU resolve with offer as Carberry says no to Interpro move. So Montpellier are now the likely suitors for CJ Stander if he is to leave. The common, I think, logic here is that Stander is looking at 2019 and that might be the one thing that keeps him in Ireland despite this huge disparity between what a French club might offer him and what he's going to be offered by the IRFU. You've also got on the back page here, you've got Heffernan Quell's retirement talk as he targets Euro medals. So Rob Heffernan at the age of 39 is saying he's going nowhere just yet. He wants one more medal before he hangs up the spikes. And Mata urges United to wait for a City slip-up. Juan Mata has called the Manchester United to look at the bigger picture in the hope that Pep Guardiola's side will make that slip-up that everybody is was kind of expecting after the last couple of matches.
Well, why don't they force a slip-up this weekend by beating them in the derby? But we have that game live and off the ball this Sunday. Myself and Kevin Caban will be at Old Trafford, and we have the Merseyside derby on the same day. A genuine Super Sunday and off the ball this Sunday afternoon. Nathan is going to be joined by Pat Nevin at Anfield. The Times Ireland edition. Well, it's gone with Joey Carberry. My future is at Leinster. He was all over the papers this morning, and clearly the question was being put to him on the back of Eddie O'Sullivan's comments on Monday Night Rugby and off the ball a couple of weeks ago that maybe his future would be better served playing his rugby elsewhere if he wants to get some game time in the number 10 shirt. And then there's a little story on Liverpool qualifying with that 7-0 win at home to Spartak Moscow, and United blocking the Manchester City cameras. City had made a request to bring their own camera crew to the away dressing rooms at Old Trafford this weekend ahead of that derby game, and Manchester United decided there's no room at the inn for you. You won't be allowed in.
Let's show you the front page of the Irish Examiner sports section. It's Philippe Coutinho celebrating as Europe's great entertainers beat Spartak Moscow 7-0 last night. Also, you'll see at the top there, you'll have Stephen McDonnell of Cork. He's out for the 2018 season, but Gary Keegan will be involved with the hurlers. So that's a surprise of sorts that John Myler won't have McDonnell at his disposal. You've also got Kerry's Wells and Move. Kingdom boss Fitzmaurice drafts in leading basketball coach, taking a leaf out of Jim Gavin's book there. Munster milestones, harvesting memories from almost 4,000 points in red. And walking on, even at 39, Rob Heffernan believes his race may not be run.
Yeah, barring an absolute disaster against Leicester this weekend, somebody will score a 4,000 point in European Cup history for Munster at Thomond Park. That game's also live and off the ball. It's an incredible weekend of live sport. 7:45 kick-off against Leicester Tigers in the Champions Cup pool stages on Saturday evening. The Irish Times, they go with last night's Champions League action. Liverpool cut loose to blow all doubt away, hammering Spartak Moscow in a game that they had to get a result from. So there's a huge amount of optimism surrounding Liverpool at the moment. And then Fernando Llorente opened his account last night. Spurs breezing to victory in a 3-0 win over Apwell Nicosia. 17 games it took for Fernando Llorente to get his first Tottenham goal. There was also a first goal for George Kevin Nkudu as well. So plenty for Mauricio Pochettino to take from that game on the back of a couple of really dodgy weeks in the Premier League.
Magnificent 7 reads the back of the Irish Daily Mail. Picture of the lads celebrating there as Liverpool blitz 5 English clubs reached last 16 for the very first time. Also, Matt O'Connor, there's an exclusive here saying he's got no grudge against Leinster. Of course, Matt O'Connor back on Irish soil this weekend as Munster take on Leicester.
The Irish Daily Star is next up on our list, and 7 heaven, Liverpool 7, Spartak Moscow nil. Coutinho leading the way. Spartak are taking apart a hat-trick for Coutinho, who wore the captain's armband last night. Owen's already referenced the comment of Juan Mata in the build-up to the Manchester derby. We've got City in our sights. That's going to be a huge game at Old Trafford at the weekend. And Tips dual player row rumbles on. It's the former minor All-Ireland winning manager David Power, now the under-20 coach, basically calling on young players in the county that want to play football to just back themselves and do it, not be worried about what those in the hurling strongholds within the county might have an opinion on. There is a talk of one player in particular who wanted to play both codes, and he is really struggling to do so because the powers that be in the county don't want it to happen.
7 heaven reads the back of Mirror Sport. Coutinho bags hat-trick in Anfield romp as all English teams qualify for Champions League knockout stage. You've also got Joey Carberry there on the back page. He's saying he will play where he is told. He'll play full back for the next 4 years if Leinster tell him to.
The Irish Sun this morning, 7 and yell. More Liverpool talk on the back of that 7-0 win against Spartak Moscow last night. It's clearly the story of the morning, because it's not often that one of the Premier League sides demolish a side like they did last night in such a massive game, and Liverpool are going in the right place very quickly. Jurgen Klopp has certainly got over that little bit of a hump that they had over the last few weeks. They're winning games. They're doing it for fun at the moment.
On the back of the Herald Sport, it says Reds right on coup. Brazilian leads the way in rout of Russians as Pool top their group. The other story there on the back page was Dean Rock. He was doing the rounds yesterday at a media event. He's talking about Dublin and that they're going to be undercooked for the National League next season. Of course, they were a little bit undercooked, you would say, this season, Dave. They managed to turn it around come the summer. Also on the back page, Brady out for the season. Robbie Brady's season is over, unfortunately.
The back of the Racing Post, it's not a huge story really. Gunners to flex their muscles. Arsenal long since through to the last 32 of the Europa League. They're up against Bate Borisov tonight. The game actually means a little bit more to the Belarusians. They have to get something from it to have any chance of moving into the knockout stages. But you would imagine it won't be the best atmosphere they have ever seen at the Emirates Stadium. Not a game that means a huge amount to Arsene Wenger or the vast majority of his players.
Let's show you the back page of the Irish News now. There's a story there from Tally saying tightened calendar will need goodwill. And also Carcoll's time on 11-year down career. Like that story there, the Tally story saying that the tightened calendar will need goodwill. That's with regards to the club season being restricted to April, and that inter-county managers will let their players go back to the club for the month of April. We've seen Stephen Rochford is not going to abide by those rules, and it's looking like a lot of other people are going to follow him. So the fact that they will need some goodwill for this to happen is an understatement of sorts.
Delighted to say the Guardian's leading with cricket, because it's been an interesting week in terms of the Ashes. The second test ended with a little bit of it was a damn squib in the end, because England put themselves into a decent position, but they ultimately collapsed on day 5. England teased us, but now they can only clutch at straws. The words whitewash now are being referenced pretty regularly as regards this Ashes series. Real fears amongst England cricket fans. They're going to lose 5-0 in Australia. The third test starts this day week, so at least they do have a week to lick their wounds. Did you get a chance to watch any of it on when you were on your travels?
No, I will blame the time zones for this, that I didn't. It didn't quite suit my cricket watching.
Well, you would have been able to watch plenty of it while still in the nightclub, given the hours. They would have emerged quite well.
That's very, very true, but it just didn't pique my interest at that time of the night, unfortunately.
What have the Telegraph got today?
I think they've got to cricket as well, Dave. Yeah, the Ashes are gone now. England must avoid 5-0 trashing. It is that unusual point in a test series where it becomes whitewash or no whitewash, where essentially the competitive nature is gone. It's no 2005, as you'll attest to.
The greatest series of all time. The greatest series of them all, as they described it. Look, they're 2-0 down. They only need to win 2 tests, draw the other, and they'll still retain the Ashes as the current holders of the Ashes. But yeah, it's getting highly unlikely that England are going to take the urn back to England with them once this test series is done. Gordon D'Arcy is going to be joining us in studio next. He's working with a charity, Don Bosco, who provides safe, loving homes for over 30 children and young adults who can't live in their own home, have had to be taken into care. They have 6 houses throughout Dublin, providing homes for young people aged 12 to 22, and we support another 50 young adults who have left care and are making their first steps out into the real world. Don Bosco are in receipt of state funding for staffing and essentials, but they do need support from the public. That's very important to turn their houses into homes. They've organised a charity raffle where the total value of all the prizes is over €20,000. There's only a limited number of tickets, 2,500 available for the draw, so it gives people a really good chance of winning. And the tickets are half price now, €10 for 1, or 3 for 20, or €50 for 10 of them. So you can really reduce the cost if you want to buy in bulk. Enter the draw. Either text the word donate to 087 720 3434 and you'll receive a donation link for the raffle, or just go straight to gofundme.com/DBCBA. Keith Woods was on Wednesday Night Rugby last night. It was his thoughts on the Leinster academy system at the moment.
Some of the real rising lights seem to be coming from Leinster. I think their academy, not so much their academy actually, because I think an awful lot of these players are coming out almost as the nearly the real deal when they come out of school at 18, 19 years of age. These guys are big, strong, fast, very skillful. The private school system has given these players an opportunity to train and study almost in a professional capacity for the 4 or 5 years before they get out of school, which means that they are brought up to a very high level of skill, strength, belief, everything that they need to be a professional, which is a huge benefit for Leinster. And so they're automatically going in. They could almost bypass the academy as it stands in Leinster. They're nearly the real deal immediately. So what that does is it sets the bar for all the other provinces, for the 3 other provinces. What are you doing differently? What are you can't really replicate a private system to a place where there's only a few private schools as opposed to the amount of them that are in Leinster. So what are they going to do differently? And that is the big question that gets posed. That's for the next 1, 2, 3 years, is what structures are going to be put in place in the provinces to deliver a level of player at 18, 19 years of age into the academy or into the sub-academy for the provinces. And this is a really taxing question for them. And a lot of it is to do with skills, and a lot of it is to do with getting a heightened skill level, and a lot of it is to do with S&C and trying to make certain that these guys are fit enough, strong enough, fast enough. I don't know that they need to be huge That's one of the things I see a lot of the younger players look very, very large. I would rather they were big but not huge, and I'd rather that their skill level was an awful lot higher.
Yeah, that was Keith Wood chatting on Wednesday Night Rugby last night, talking about the Leinster Academy and the progress they've made over the last few years. Gordon D'Arcy has joined us in studio. Alan Quinlan still here alongside Eoin as well. Gordon, thanks a million. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
We were informed this morning, Tommy, going through his research, tells us that you lads made your international debut on the same day.
Yeah.
Almost 18 years ago.
A long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were chatting about it. All went wrong for me after that. I played for a little bit. He didn't play for about 4 or 5 years. They had very few caps after the World Cup in 99.
Here we are. There's you, Gordon.
Yeah,
shaved head.
And
Romania back in 99.
Would you actually believe I've lost weight in that picture, which is frightening.
Was that a statement, the haircut at the time, or had you head lice or something?
No, I think it was probably trying to look slimmer, maybe. I don't know.
We couldn't find Quinny on the ball during the game, so we had to get a stock photo from him.
Yeah.
And he's
from
probably
99.
Probably at the bottom of a ruck, enjoying the benefits of not being a video referee.
You were only
involved.
18 or 19? 18 was
19,
it?
yeah.
19.
Was that haircut known as the Dave McIntyre in 1999 as well?
You have an age today, Quinny. There's not a lot of difference there.
Kept the same hair as well.
You have. A lot of us are a lot thinner in the intervening 18-year periods. Up top, that is. It's an awful lot of stuff to get through today, lads. We're going to get into these Champions Cup fixtures. The Munster-Leicester game is live and off the ball on Saturday evening. But Joey Carberry's everywhere today. He was doing some interviews with the media yesterday. The headline basically being that he's not going anywhere. And it's on the back, I guess, the question that was being put to him after what Eddie O'Sullivan was saying, Gordon, on Monday Night Rugby a couple of weeks ago and off the ball, that if he really wants to be a world-class 10, he needs to spend more time in the 10 jersey. And the way Johnny Sexton is playing and staying injury-free, he might have to wait a long time for that to happen. It was never really a story, that was it? He would never consider leaving, for now anyway.
Not really. I don't think there's any... he's not going to be necessarily challenging for that number 10 spot straight away. I think, that natural transfer of knowledge is, he is the best number 10 in the world, and I don't think Joey is the complete player yet either. So I think there's much more for him to learn with being in around that a player of Johnny's skill level, and I still think there's a huge amount for him to learn from Stuart Lancaster. So there is, if you look at it purely from an international perspective, and you say, well, we need our backup number 10 to be playing week in, week out, because he clearly is the best the number 2 at the moment. I think he's performing capably well when he plays in the position. And his, only time will tell how that affects on the international level. But he's playing well. He looks happy, and you can't put a price on a player being happy.
Realistically, at the moment, Alan, Byrne is the second 10 at Leinster, in that he's the guy who's playing in the 10 jersey when Joey and Jonathan aren't there. Would you fear that we might end up in a position that we did in the quarterfinals of the Rugby World Cup in 2015, that we lose our main man going into an absolutely massive game, and Joey Carberry has not spent any time or anywhere near enough time playing test rugby at the fly half position, and then he's thrust in to try and win us a game?
A little bit of a concern, but I think he's that good that he's the type of player that I think he can play at that level, even in a big test match if he's thrown in there. I think he's a superb talent. He reminds me of Bowden Barrett. I think just you can play him anywhere in the back line. He can play 12, 13, wing, full back. You could probably play him scrum half as well. He's that talented. So I wouldn't be... I think Ross Byrne is someone who may have to make a decision because he's number 3 effectively, I think.
But will always play a lot of rugby as long as he's not. Yeah, as long as he doesn't reach international standards, he'll play a huge amount of rugby.
Yeah, the only thing about that is there's been a lot of injuries in the Leinster backline. You've seen Isa coming in and out of the field. You've seen Rob Kearney hasn't played really any rugby this year before coming into the November internationals. So that we're kind of looking at it as that is the status quo. Had there been other options in the back 3, where would Joey Carberry have played in those big matches? Now we can't answer that. It's a nice thought piece, but would Byrne have started over Joey Carberry? That would have meant Joey probably going onto the bench. So that's the bit. So Joey's, as Quinny is saying, his ability, his versatility is so powerful that you just want him on the field, and it just happened that.
And we view that as a negative sometimes, don't we? Yeah. Versatility. We go, well, particularly from my own position, the back row. Are you a 6, are you a 7, are you an 8? Sometimes you can be all 3, and then you end up being on the bench because you cover So I just think someone like Carberry, we should embrace his talent, and I don't think he should go anywhere. I don't think he needs to play 10 every week. Of course, I'm sure Leo Cullen, Stuart Lancaster will try and manage him in some Pro 14 games when they get the opportunity to play him 10. But I think there's a lot being made out of it. And, you know, Eddie's point, Eddie O'Sullivan's point in theory is it probably makes some sense for him. And in an ideal world, you'd love to have 4 Irish 10s in all the provinces, all competing with each other in a perfect world. But the guy is only playing at this level for over 13, 14 months. He's got to stay where he is, where he's been nurtured, where he's, and as he says himself, he loves it there, and he will learn a lot. D'Arcy's saying Stuart Lancaster has been fantastic for him there as well, so he'll learn a lot there. So I don't think he needs to go anywhere.
You know, when you frame it, when you look at it in that very, very narrow frame or lens of saying, okay, well, if the Rugby World Cup repeats itself again, and we lose 6 players, you know, I fail to see any international team in a knockout tournament at the pressures of that.
Prepped, yeah.
No, that can
with
survive.
that.
Like New Zealand lose all those players, they don't win the World Cup, and I fully do believe that. But let's say we do lose. If you're looking at, you want your second number 10 to be as up to speed as possible and be able to navigate that. But, you know, even if he was dropped into that game at having played 2 or 3 seasons, he wasn't changing the result of that game. You know, Argentina had
problems everywhere else.
You know, you lost Paulie, you lost across the board. It was
unprecedented, wasn't it?
It was carnage.
You know, it was typical Irish jinxing.
The only
it's like,
concern,
don't lose these guys and we'll be fine. And hence all 6 of them got out.
Would you have a concern, D'Arcy, with maybe game management? So I wouldn't. That's the one that I think about, because obviously from a football point of view, we saw him against Fiji. The step, the pass, you can't coach that. It's just natural ability, outstanding ability. But probably the one concern is, and for your 10 in the wet, mucky defensive game where you're placing the ball, Sexton is the master.
That comes
at
with
it.
experience, though,
So
doesn't it?
that's where he probably needs to be exposed if Joe Schmidt can in the next couple of years.
Yeah, well, on that, we had Fiona Steed on OTB AM a couple of weeks ago, and I put it to her, although this would infuriate Johnny Sexton, he wants to play every game, should Joe Schmidt start him in Joey Carberry if he's fit? Because we know the wrist, we don't know when it's going to heal. He has to get the cast off first, and then it could be anything from 3 to 6 weeks by the time he's able to get back to full training and full contact. But would you start him against Italy? Would you start him against maybe Italy and Scotland, or Italy and Wales, and leave Johnny on the bench? As angry as that would make Johnny, it's not necessarily Johnny's decision to make, so that you're getting Joey Carberry proper game time in a genuine test match against a top tier side when everything's at stake.
Well, I think kind of just to feed off of Quinny's point, he's saying, I actually thought his game management in the Fiji game was actually quite good. His a bit when he chose to kick, why he was kicking, were all really spot on. It just happened to be quite a disjointed game.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I think Sexto is probably in a place where he's quite, you know, he seems pretty happy, and I know that's not generally said about Johnny, but he seems quite content with life, and you know, back in Dublin playing really well, injury free, and all these kind of things. And once you hit a certain point in your career, you understand that you can't play every game, and you can see it. Like we've been reading about Messi saying that, you know, he's happy to play less games now and for the quality. I don't think, I think Johnny will, if anything, that'll bring him up to a higher level, because he's if there's 12 international games a season, I'm going to play 7 or 8 of them. You know, that's a brilliant way for him to focus his game. And we've seen time and time again, the amount of times he's out for 3, 4, 5 weeks, hits the ground running, and just, it's like he's never been out. So I think...
well, if you were still, in your mind, at the peak of your powers, fully fit, going into a Six Nations Championship, maybe one of the final 3 or 4 Six Nations Championship you would play in if you're injury free, and you're told, well, we're actually going to sit you out for 2 of them, you'd be absolutely bulling, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, it did happen to me.
Yeah, well, it happened because someone was picked ahead of you because they thought they were the form player in that position. If you're told this isn't actually to do with form, this is because we need to give this guy a run in the 10 jersey.
Well, it wasn't, you know, without going too deeply into it, it wasn't.
Go on, let's go on as deep as you wish.
No, it wasn't fully based on form. It was about utilising players, and it was, you know, and again, I was at the stage. So when we won in 2014, I'm 34 years of age. To say I was going to play every match in the Six Nations at the full. Now, it doesn't make it any easier when you say, listen, you're not playing against things, but I was still picked in against England. I was still picked in the against.
But you
France.
were fit, raring to go.
Yeah,
can't have been easy. An
again,
easy watch.
There's a huge confirmation bias on my side saying, "Well, I know I'm perfect. I'm ready to go." But if you're the coach and you're objective and you're looking at it, you're going, "Okay, well, I've got resources here that I can now utilise." So yeah, you're talking about Joey starting against Italy. I think that's a fair. That's a fair statement to make. For him to start against Wales, maybe not so much, and against Italy, maybe not so much. But I think you could see him starting to get reintroduced a little bit more. You saw in the November Internationals, the first time.
20 minutes. He'll get
but in the November Internationals, the first time ever we've seen a series of selections that was pre-made before the tournament, before the 3-match started, and he kept to it almost rigidly. Players were in, players were out. See Andrew Conway not really involved for the third game. That was pre-made. All these decisions were done, and he stuck to it. So you can see him trying to go towards this.
And the players would probably have been told that as well. So I think there's a room to play Carberry in Australia. I'm not saying that Sexton will stay at home or not, and
I think he will.
Johnny Sexton, it might be an opportunity to say, look, we've 3 tests in Australia, we've a World Cup coming up the year after. Take the summer off. He's had a fair kind of run at it. Injuries, the concussions, being in France, all that stuff. It might be an opportunity to go with Carberry in Australia.
The Irish version of a sabbatical for the...
Yeah, because he won't get one afterwards. You think New Zealand, Argentina next year, they'll have a Tier 2 nation again in November. Will that be adequate preparation for Carberry? Paddy Jackson maybe back in the mix, who knows, but when you head into 2019, there's not a lot of wriggle room then for making changes and looking at those kind of options. But he'd probably get X number of games with Leinster at 10 as well in that period. But I don't see it as a major thing. For me, as a former forward, I don't know if D'Arcy will agree or not, if the pack deliver up front, it's much easier for any fly half. I know he's got the big decisions to make, where he plays, the territory, all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, that game against Argentina wasn't down to Ian Madigan and Johnny Sexton being gone. I think up front we lost that battle early on. We lost the collisions. We lost the physical side of it. And even if Sexton was playing that day, as good as he is, I'm not sure. His presence is massive as well. Even in a bit of adversity, he's shown that. But
it doesn't matter who's playing 10 if you take Paul O'Connell, Peter O'Mahony and Sean O'Brien away.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it doesn't matter.
Life very difficult.
I wouldn't say it doesn't matter, but maybe we kind of look at it. Madigan had played really well when he'd been involved in Ireland for all his caps as well. So I think, like Dar said, you take 5-6 out of any team, they're a different side, and the opposition sense vulnerability as well.
Is David Nucifora surveying all of this? Is he looking at the overall sense of things, and at what point does he think, right, Joey Carberry needs to be getting some game time? I know it's not an immediate thing, I think we've established that already, but is there a danger of that happening potentially too soon?
There's an incredible danger of trying to guess David Nucifora's game plan or his thought process.
Sure.
Because we get very little information from him, and
publicly, I think Leo and Leo will be... he'll have a strong opinion on that, but I say behind the scenes they're probably having conversations, but ultimately they've got to back the provinces as well. There is certain amount of, I wouldn't say interference, but dialogue between all the coaches, provincial coaches, because that's just the way the structure is. But he can't kind of ultimately tell Leo Cullen, well, he has to play this number of games to be in Joe's squad. Like Joe and Leo, I'm sure, have a good relationship. They work together, so I'm sure those conversations will have, but it won't be to the point of telling him.
No one's going to be dictating who he's.
Well, I don't think so. Darcy probably knows that dynamic better.
They're inextricably linked, but then they're also completely working against each other at various different times. Like Leo's mandate is to win a Heineken Cup and to win a Pro 12. And in the same breath, have players ready for the national team, where the national team don't really mind if or care. Well, they can work without a provincial team having any success, as long as players are playing at high quality games and playing and playing at a high level throughout the season. So, we're used to success in the provinces, and I've come from that system where we have provincial success feeds into the national success, and that is becoming harder and harder because the European goalposts have changed so dramatically, and the resources in Ireland have gotten, haven't expanded at the same rate as our competition. So it's a really interesting puzzle, and how it fits together, I don't think anybody's going to crack that anytime soon.
All of this started with the discussion around Joey Carberry and Eddie's comments on him maybe needing to move elsewhere. One player who's definitely moving elsewhere is Jordy Murphy. It's been confirmed this week that he's signed a 2-year deal to move to Ulster at the end of the season. And I just wonder, is this something that we're going to see more of, Alan, in the years to come, that we're finally going to get ourselves into a position where we're utilising the resources of the 4 provincial provinces, the 4 teams that we have available to pick the international side from, and not have a logjam in one position at one province and maybe a little bit of a lack of resources in that same position in another province?
It's a player's decision. I think Jordy would have looked at probably the competition in Leinster and where he's at. You think 12 months ago he was starting against the All Blacks. He ruptures his Achilles. The competition there with Van der Fleer and Levy after coming on the scene as well. So there's 3 top quality, outstanding open sides there. So he's made a decision probably, which is a brave one, because sometimes guys stay, we'll give it another year, and suddenly things haven't changed. I'm sure Leo Cullen would have loved to have him. If 2 of them are gone with Ireland, they have 2 at home, they can play 6, 7, 8 as well. So is it something that we're going to see more of? It's completely down to the players. I think, David Nusafora, Joe, can talk to the player and say, look, would you not consider maybe there's a weakness here, and they would try and manage him if for example, with Munster, Chris Clute, South African, is signed a couple of months ago. I would rather see Jordy Murphy down in Munster playing as a 7. I think he would do really well there. The crowd would love him. He's aggressive. He's a popular guy, and a very good player. But we have a South African there instead of a 7, whereas he's gone up north to Ulster, which is a good move for him as well. He'll play games. There's options to play in the back row up there.
Is the culture shifting though? 10 years ago you wouldn't have countenanced this happening too often. There were players maybe on the fringes, the likes of Felix Jones heading down to Munster, the likes of Niall Ronan, for example. We've seen Andrew Conway go from Leinster down to Munster as well. Luke Fitzgerald, if we believe the stories, was close enough to moving to Munster. Ian Madigan would have perhaps had an option of going to one of them. Guys,
younger guys who maybe weren't kind of.
But given they had much time these guys spent in Irish camp together,
I think that's an end result. I think that's you're looking at that maybe at the end result. I think there's a bigger issue, which is the underlying that there isn't. So Leinster, because they have a backlog in their back row, they're coming through the private school system. They're coming up, and that's that is what it is. But every year they are having to play 50 players in a season, so they are being forced because they lose. Over half of they lose 20 players, 25 players to the Six Nations or to the national team every year. So they're being forced to blood players more so than the other, and it puts a huge, strain on the resources in the academies. Going, you have to deliver, because we will need 8 players every season, maybe 10 players every season to be filling into a team, and we still want to challenge for the Pro 12. The other provinces don't have. Connacht, we see players coming through their system, but we don't see it in Munster and we don't see it in Ulster to the same extent. And you have to be careful with that, because you are seeing a Stockdale coming through, and you are seeing a couple of young forwards in Munster making that same progress. But coming back to the Jordy Murphy thing, the movement of players. Yeah, I think it's only natural that is going to happen. But if you're looking at it reasonably unbiasedly, you look at it that it's going to be depleting the Leinster stocks, because there isn't the same strength and depth in maybe the other provinces. So, is that fair? Is that equitable? Only if these guys move, and then, Jordy is always in the Irish camp from the Ulster team, and one less back row is then staying in Leinster.
So they're victims of their own success.
Absolutely, in the same way the IRFU were victims of their own success in the last, since 2009, unprecedented success. And it's very naive to think you're going to have all this success and try and keep all your players at the same quantum of money as you were a few years ago.
And it does hit your resource, because when you've 17, 18 guys away with Ireland, the law of averages states that most teams will have 6, 7, 8 injuries at any given time. Now Leinster are in good health at the moment. They've only a couple But we see with the other provinces a number of guys who are out injured. So you're up on 25 players there. He then has to find another 23 or 30 players to mix and manoeuvre. Like
he used over 50 players last season.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. So, but in saying that, they have more numbers here in Dublin. They have the school system is producing a lot of quality. But you're right, Leinster won't be happy. They would rather keep Jordy Murphy. But I think it comes down to the individual. I think Leo would have been pretty honest probably and said, look, I can't guarantee any of the three open sides the starting berth, because on their day, all three are outstanding.
But Jordy Murphy's thinking, this is with one eye on the World Cup. He's not thinking, I want to be playing more rugby for Leinster.
Matches. He's playing matches, play matches.
And he'll start Champions Cup games for Ulster.
And if he goes up and plays 20 games up in Ulster next season, or 25 games, or whatever the number is, he's getting battle hardened, he's getting match fitness, and the injury probably would have played a role in this, because when you were out
week in, week out, so Joe's going to look at players and say, well, how many minutes have you got? You know, he looks at statistics look better over the more games you play. So it's an ambitious step by him.
But you get better with games as well, Lars, don't you? Your match fitness, your hardness. Yeah, well, some guys, in rare instances, but particularly in the back row, it's you've so many involvements in the game. And if you're playing week in, week out and getting big numbers, 17, 18, 20 games in the season, you're improving. You have an ability to work on stuff. You can get the feedback from the coaches. And like D'Arcy was saying, Joe can look then and say, well, here's your stats, here are your numbers. And Van der Fleer might, having to play half a games, or Dan Levy, or whoever starts at 7 for Leinster, and he might leapfrog one of those. And then suddenly there's an injury, Sean O'Brien pulls a hammer, or something goes wrong, and he's in. And then once you get in, you play one good game in that green jersey, and you hold on to it, you know, if you perform at a high level. So, but it's an unbelievably competitive area. If there's 8 or 9 guys in Leinster that could all play for Ireland, all start for Leinster. There's a couple of guys coming through that are still in school that I've heard names being mentioned to me that they're outstanding players. Max Deegan, he's someone who is, you know, a brilliant player, and it depends what happens Jamie Heaslip, but he's probably third choice, number 8. He's probably got to make a decision. What do I do? Do I want to make a real drive and try and push out one of these guys and play in another province or go somewhere else? Leinster won't want to lose him, of course.
Just on that point of the academies and how kind of high-powered their engine has to work to produce all these players, is it producing quality as well as the quantity? Like, I think Jacob Stockdale is a great example to actually analyse this point in. Like, would Jacob Stockdale have been an outstanding player regardless of what academy he came through, regardless of what country he came through? Because it seems to me that this is a very, very special talent. Or do we have the IRFU to thank here and say, right, they got the best out of a gem that needed to be polished anyway?
I think Stockdale was going to come through regardless. I saw him at the Under-20s World Cup, and he stood out in that game, and you know, it stood out like you would expect a Bowden Barr to stand out at an Under-20 World Cup. He was absolutely incredible. The academies, you know, Tyke Furlong and Marty Moore, when these guys were coming through the academy, they knew there was a shortage of front row stocks, and they just brought guys in, brought them in. And then they eventually, you know, the more you bring in, the higher chance you have of success. Yes, there is a bigger player population and in Dublin and in Leinster, and you know, but that is what it is. So the strategy that works in Dublin can't work in Munster, in Connacht, and in Ulster, and they have to. If you roll out the same formats, you're going to have vastly different results. Where's the investment in underage rugby in Leinster and primarily in Dublin comes from goes into the clubs, and you've got that, and again you have that population density, and that's going to feed up naturally into the private schools and ergo into the academies. That doesn't happen in Munster, where you can go down to Nina and you can, you know, are they having the same numbers that Lansdowne have on a Saturday morning? If not, why not? How do they get them? Where's that rural investment? Where are they getting all of these clubs? It is a harder job to be done in Munster, in Connacht, and in Ulster. But that doesn't make it that's not an excuse for it not to be delivering. It just has to be done differently.
And if you put 100 young lads out, stand them outside there in one corner, put 20 over there, you've more options with that 100 for sure to get. If you're picking 10 guys out as opposed to the 20, so the numbers do make a difference, but the system makes a difference as well. My little fella's playing under 8s or under 9s with St Mary's in school.
But
I went up to St Michael's 2 weeks ago to watch a game. There's about 15 games going on at one time. Like, it's astronomical.
But that's my point. That is happening
all over the place.
But that's not due to Leinster or due to IRFU. They feed into it when it's organised. But why is that not happening in some iteration in Munster?
Well, they've more threats around the GAA and soccer and all that. I know they still have threats, but it's a numbers game as well, D'Arcy.
You've got to go back to the
in Munster. Make a difference.
Going back to the end point is the academies aren't delivering, so there needs to be an investment at the grassroots level. And if you don't have the investments, you're talking about numbers. If you don't get numbers invested at that stage, you're not going to have an academy system.
What if the numbers just aren't there? We see it. I see it when I bring my little fella to his TOTS GA training on a Saturday morning. There are 150 kids there, and that has been replicated across 70 or 80 other clubs in Dublin. That no other county can compete with those kind of numbers. So you're saying that, well, how do you get the numbers up? Well, they just don't exist in the vast majority of places where rugby is played in this country.
They exist for GAA in other parts of the country. Like that is a culture that I presume is created over years. That the whole Saturday morning thing.
But
is kind of
I've been blown away by.
You'll have it there. I go down to Wexford every now and then, and they will still have 200 kids. Maybe not 200. They might have 100 kids on a Saturday or Sunday morning, but it's done by Wexford Wanderers. And is there another Tyke Furlong in there? That's not getting the polishing and the nurturing that could bring through.
The point, D'Arcy, is Wexford Wanderers have 100 kids there. Who else around that area has another 100? Whereas if you go to Dublin, there's 200 in St Michael's, there's 200 down in St Michael's. No, I know, absolutely. It is a numbers game. I think the academy, the structures come from the IRFU and the academy. So I always work off this example. With Munster, the replacing Ronan O'Gara, who you played most of your career with Ireland, probably all of your career. Ronan was outstanding talent. Where was the replacement? Where was the Joey Carberry? Where was the Paddy Jackson? Where was the Johnny Sexton in Munster coming through to challenge him? He played for 15 years with Munster. There was 6A schools at the time in the province, or 6 or 7 maybe. I stand corrected. So that's 15 years by 7. You're talking about a couple of, maybe 100, 150, 200 out halves who played in those schools teams. Not one that I can remember came through with the ability to challenge him.
Yeah, but so sure, you can look at Leinster as well. I mean, Johnny Sexton was playing for Leinster for 9 years now.
Yeah, they're unique
There
players.
hasn't been a single 10 that's come through the Leinster Academy that has been able to challenge him to the point where he's in danger of losing his place.
My point is, sometimes it can be a bit of luck as well. It can be a number, 5 really talented guys in a certain number of positions come through at the same time. When I played with Munster, some of the players we had, that was nothing to do with academies. That was nothing to do with, it was more to do with the club system that you're saying. And we kind of were unique that we had just a group of guys at a time.
You can't separate the professional game from the club game. And
no, not at all, I agree.
It's painful and it's unpalatable, but if you do not invest in that game, so you're saying there may not be the population, but you can double, you might be able to get more players in if it's invested in it, if the facilities are, not the facilities, but if the coaching is of a higher standard, if it's enjoyable, if it's well run. The one thing you go into Gaelic and you go into GAA, it's GAA and hurling. You go in, you've got ex-players in there and that have played probably inter-county hurling or football, but it's run like clockwork. It's, you go in, kids dropped off, and I see it, and they're just run out. You go into a rural rugby club and it's 2 people who may not have even played rugby and it's basically a glorified creche. That is not going to produce the next Ronan O'Gara or the next Johnny Sexton to take over that. That investment needs to be put in if you want to create viable academies in the other 3 provinces. And I'm happy to be wrong in that, but I do think there is an investment, a certain level of investment that needs to go in there.
Just on that point, because it kind of ties in nicely with the Peter O'Mahony situation and your column yesterday in terms of what funding is actually being given, because we obviously don't know what's on the table in the Peter O'Mahony deal, but we don't know what's on the table for the academies either, or what's being put into grassroots, if I'm correct there.
Yeah, and again, like there is a vacuum of information around this, and that's that is what it is. There's no point in labouring that. We don't know what is invested into it, but I think the professional game is heavily reliant on that private school production conveyor belt in Dublin, and the other couple of gems that come through and would come through anyway. Peter O'Mahony was going to come through. Stockdale is going to would have come through. Robbie Henshaw would come through. They would come through regardless where they were or where they were playing.
I want to mention what you were writing about this week. You wrote incredibly well on your experiences of dealing with the IRFU when it comes to these contract negotiations, and obviously Ian Henderson, Peter O'Mahony, CJ Standard, they're all in the headlines over the last couple of weeks, and players will always feel they deserve more. No matter what you give them, they'll always feel, well, look, maybe I'm meriting a bit more. But you talked about the contract you signed in 2010. It's all you take a hefty pay cut while you felt you were still at the peak of your powers, as you put it yesterday. Do the RFU use that year was coming into a World Cup year? Did they use that against you, knowing how desperate you were to play?
Though, the bigger one, and the one he came down was still massive.
I didn't have the puppy dog eyes to go in. Oh please, can I have a bigger contract?
But it was a World Cup cycle coming to the end of it. You were desperate to play in that World Cup. Did they use that against you?
It's good negotiation. Like, I think, anything works reasonably off a bell chart, and once you pass your peak. They had decided 30. They played a really, really good. They had to concede on the two previous contracts, and they felt this is a time where we can take something back. And
so they did.
I was a little bit. It prepared me for the next one, because thank God that was like jumping off a cliff. But yeah, that one was hard to get your head around initially, but then you kind of have to look at it a little bit reflectively and go, yeah, I'm a depreciating asset. I think I'm brilliant and I think I'm going to play forever. I'm not. They're looking at that going 31. The average age of a career is 8 years in professional contract. A professional rugby, this guy's been playing for 12 years at this stage. So yeah, we're going to take something back here. And I went and found some Mickey Mouse thing. It was a little bit extra, but I was like, you know what? I'm actually happy to stay here. But at least at that point, I was given the opportunity to get back to my base salary through performance fees. So if I played if I hit all my bonuses, I could get back to where I was. So at least there was a huge carrot in that. So it wasn't completely whipped out from underneath me. But had that happened at 27, is the case.
Even this close to a World Cup. So let's put yourself in the O'Mahony/Standard situation.
Yeah, I think there is definitely, it's a different mindset, because I was 30. I was 31. My life is fully ensconced. I was getting married in the near future. Wife may not have known that at the time, but
so take 4 years off that. And add the increased value in contracts that are available in France.
At the time, it was a very easy contract with the RFUs. I went in and said, guys, that's the offer. I said, no. This is what I want. And it more or less happened. I played the Six Nations with a contract and played well and got it. That's fine. But if there was an offer on the table that was going to double my salary, and I think there is a balance in there, and I'm not sure we're at that point yet. There is a nice equilibrium point where yes, you can stay in Ireland and you get to play for Ireland, but I don't think putting a price on playing for Ireland is fair both ways. I think you can't say you have to take, because if you say, well, you're staying here to play for Ireland, you're putting a price on it by taking less. So I do think there is definitely a midway point, for argument's sake. If it's €100 and you're being asked to stay in Ireland for 30, to me that's not fair. But around that 50, 55, 60 euros, I think you are starting to get to a point where you're saying, yeah, this is worth taking less, because I will be able to earn if you're saying I'm staying in Ireland, I'm going to be better protected, I'm going to have a longer career. You at least have the opportunity to earn in the aggregate, and you play for longer.
And there's the corporate side of things, the sponsorship side of things, that you leave yourself, your profile will increase if you stay over here.
I wouldn't know about that. You'd have to refer that to my learning.
Well, you should have known about it then if you didn't.
Listen, lad, there was about 5 or 6 other stories I wanted to touch on, but we need to mention the games that are coming up this weekend. We've got Munster Leicester Tigers live from Thomond Park. It's a 7:45 kickoff and off the ball this Saturday evening, and next weekend we're doing the whole show from the Aviva Stadium when Leinster take on Exeter in what could be an absolutely huge game in round 4 of the pool stages. Munster, Alan, this is the Leinster pool at the moment, Gordon, so we'll start with that. I mean, certainly the top three teams, Leinster, Exeter and Montpellier, will all feel they're still very much in it at the moment. Glasgow obviously out. back-to-back games against Exeter. They're in a good place, Leinster, at the moment. At least they're top of the pool.
Yeah.
What do they need to get out of Sandy Park? And if they lose and leave with nothing...
At least the top of the pool, yeah. I've the experience of playing against Exeter. They are a brilliant team. I absolutely love them. I love their whole business model. I love the way they play rugby. I think they're just absolutely fantastic. It's a brilliant game of rugby, and it kind of stirs the emotions a little bit when you're thinking back to the brilliant memories you have from playing in the Champions Cup or the old Heineken Cup. This is a game where you're kind of getting your teeth into it. Leinster are playing brilliant rugby. They're fully fit. Players are well rested after the November internationals, after the Lions. They didn't have to get out of second gear really in the November internationals. They're coming in really, really fresh, and Leinster are playing really, really well. They need to be playing well against Exeter. Exeter just have that complete faith in their game plan, and they just keep going and keep going. I remember playing in the RDS, and it was like I think we won by 2 points, and only afterwards did I think, I probably expected to win by more there.
They just wouldn't go away that day.
Just horrific. Their ability, their composure. Slade is an incredible player for them as well. Jack Noel coming into it. So this is I'm really, really excited about this game as a neutral, as a guy with a blue, always with a blue lens on. This is a tough game for Leinster to win, and I don't think anyone in Leinster is taking it for granted. The away game, always favours the home team, but just the way Exeter play, they can just grind you away. This will be where we're talking about tactics earlier on. This will have to be a tactical masterclass from Johnny to get something out of this, but they need to get something out of it.
From Munster's point of view, Quinny, it's such an awkward pool at the moment, isn't it? And where would you have them in terms of the likelihood of them getting out of it, given that they didn't manage to put Racing away with a bonus point? They let Racing leave Thomond Park with a bonus point. They have to go to Welford Road in a week's time. And even Cast, having got that draw and the bonus point in their second game, they'll still feel they're in it if they can pick something up in the back-to-back games against Racing.
Yeah,
this is not going to be a pool that will offer up a best runner-up.
Well, round 3 and 4, that kind of dictates where you're going to end up. I think you want to be kind of standing in round 4 and say, right, we're still in it heading into 5 and 6, or else you can be out of it. It can be very clear cut if you lose these 2 games. Leicester lost 38-0 to Munster last year in this fixture. What will they be thinking coming back? Matt O'Connor.
Turned it around a week later, didn't they?
It makes no sense in some ways. 18-16, they won against Munster the week after. They're 6th in the Premiership. They've lost 4 games. They lost the last 2, so they're not the superpower they were. Either are Munster for sure. I think Munster are under a lot more pressure because of the injury profile they have at the moment. I think with Taute out, Farrell out, Earls out, that affects him in the back line. The uncertainty around 10 this year. I think Keatley's played quite well. His confidence looks to be higher. Blaine has a lot of indecision. And
there's the pool now. It's
you look at Leinster on 10 points after 2 rounds. They can afford to possibly lose 2 games, Leinster, and still they'll make 20 points. They'll be in the knockout stages. So they could have this series with this little mini series with Exeter, or else they're capable of going win there. But I think Munster, first and foremost, they've just got to focus on this weekend, which sounds very simplistic. They've got to grind
spot
out.
On. Like, it doesn't really matter what happened.
They have to grind out a result.
They lose this weekend, they're out.
Well, that's the thing. Will they be hoping for a game like the Racing game, as in whoever blinks first wins?
Just grind out a result. I think they could play better. Hopefully, you'd want it to go better, but it's all about just 4 points this weekend. That's all they can focus on, and then hope that they can be in a good shape the week after. And if they lose, get a bonus point coming away, and then really, after round 4, like I said, look into 5 and 6 and say, well, we've got to go and beat Racing, and we've got to beat Cast at home, and hopefully you're on that 18, 19 point mark and you're in the quarterfinals. I don't think it's a pool where you're going to have a team topping the pool and having a home quarterfinal. I think this is just about getting out of the group, this pool. So it's very interesting to see where they're at. They've had so much change in the last number of weeks. They've about 6 guys to come back into the team this weekend, which will give them a huge boost. But the injury profile is horrendous. And what does Van Gran do in 2 weeks since he's come in? This is his second week.
Talk about a baptism of fire, Gordon.
Nothing.
I mean, They've lashed him in at the deep end. He's had one game to get his feet on the table. I think I've thrown 3 cliches in there in one sentence. But they managed to get past the Ospreys. You're taking on Leicester in the Champions Cup in your second game. That's as tough as it gets. You could actually be heading over there first, but I mean, it's not far off it.
Yeah, it could be an awful lot worse.
It's a different Leicester though, D'Arcy. It's not like one of the dominant old Leicester sides. So
yeah, they're playing. Their
backline is actually stronger than their pack.
Yeah, but they are having a little bit of a resurgence under Matt O'Connor, and he has that, whatever issues he had with trying to get his game plan into the Leinster, get that wealth of knowledge that he has across, it just didn't translate. But he speaks the Leicester language. And, I think that's I think he's avoiding inch columns by saying he's no animosity coming back to Leinster and wants to focus on the...
How do you reflect on his time as Leinster coach a couple of years out? I mean, he delivered a Pro 12 championship and a European semi-final where you came within a whisker of winning it.
Yeah, he also dropped me for the last 6 months of my career, so that's hard to take. That's hard. And that's
you're never going to like a coach that doesn't pick you.
No, but again, I had to look at that myself personally, and I kind of go, well, in the time when I was in it was there, I can't believe I'm not playing. I suppose when you look back at it and go, mistakes creeping in, probably was moving towards a 20. Had I played a season too long, and all those kind of questions. I just don't think Matt was. He has a great philosophy on rugby and how to play it, and ball in hand and all that kind of that approach to rugby, which is good in the modern game. His ability to translate it and get it across just didn't fit in the lens, and that happens. So it just wasn't a perfect fit for him and for Leinster, and I don't think anybody would disagree with it. I think he's back in a club that, oddly enough, he probably would have suited a Munster team where it is very much where your not where your heart in your sleeve, but that confrontational approach which resonates quite strongly with them. But for Van Graan, what does he do here?
He just tries to inspire. I think that's all he can do is get into the players' heads.
But I think you kind of almost have to break it, look at it, and just go back to it, and kind of almost that 81-minute approach, and just say, as if we deliver, if we do it, if we go back to the Racing game, we go back to look at these things we can do. We just have to do it for 80 tiny little battles. We just have to be perfect. Low discipline. We're playing at home. Let's just get 4 points here, and whatever happens over there, we'll worry about that. Munster there is that spirit in Munster rugby. It has been there. It's still there for the moment with Peter O'Mahony. So hopefully someone like him can, whatever. The great thing about having backs injured is forwards don't have to give the ball out there. So if there's 3 or 4 injuries in the backs, and you've got Keatley who's playing well, just play something that probably fits. Probably fits. So the only difference is they don't have a back row who, like yourself, who will walk across the 10 channel, move into first receiver, kick the ball, and make all decisions for everybody else.
He used to always give out to me like that in training. Get out of the way. Himself and Trico.
It's not frustrating. It's not frustrating at all when you're
in the early part of your career. You would have had Keith Wood probably battling for the exact same space with him, trying to clear their lines, trying to exit the 22.
Just one last point. Frano today in the Indo is saying that Rassie Erasmus has left Munster in the shit a little bit. Is that too harsh?
He's described his decision to up sticks mid-season as unforgivable.
We'll see. You know what? I thought about that. I thought about all the great stuff he did last year, the way he handled the Axel situation, the way he inspired people, and he was brilliant at all that. But part of me was very angry that he's jumping ship, particularly after saying, I'm here for the 3 years, I'm going to see out my contract. And I think it's the last thing Munster needed was that unsettling scenario again, where now we've created something, we've built a little momentum going forward. The guy who does it is now gone. The players loved him, and they loved Nienaber as well, I think, the defensive coach. So they had a little bit of stability, a foundation to build on, and an ability probably to attract in some players. So I think players would have wanted to, I want to go to Rassie Erasmus. I've been hearing all these wonderful stories. He seemed like a very humble guy, very mannerly, a very good impression of him in the media, all that stuff. And that kind of tickles players' fancies as well. So then you have Van Graan in, and it's the uncertainty. He's never been a head coach. Donncha Ryan leaves. That's a massive blow from he kind of epitomised what's everything about Munster. Zebo's leaving, the injury profiles. They signed Grobler, he gets injured, Tauta gets injured. So they've had a few hammer blows. Now they've Mahoney standard. There's not any good stories coming. So he's kind of going back to the Van Graan piece. I think Rassie did leave him in the I won't use the word you used, Eoin, but in the shit a bit.
I just think it's a little bit disingenuous. You know, they are all very, very educated people, and to come out with a statement like that in January when clearly a conversation must have taken place. You can say, oh, well, I was trying not to unsettle the team. There is different rhetoric you can use to say, okay, well, let's talk about it in the summer. And, you know, at least leave something there, and players can maybe start getting ready to it. I just, you know, it's almost a very soccer thing where it's like, oh, I'm absolutely, definitely, 100%. Oh, actually, I'm going.
Yeah. Anything can happen in football. They finished the end. You hear him.
Well, it was clear the players felt that he had decided to stay.
Well, he told the players. He told Niall Scannell came out after one of the games that he's definitely staying, and he announced that. So I don't know where this translation or communication broke down, but ultimately it's the last thing they needed.
But it's an international job, so I have no problem with a player, and you know, coaches will do that, and they'll build it into their contracts. There's just a way to do something, and then there's a way not to do it.
Bloody release clause, I don't know about it.
This was the epitome of how not to do it, particularly for a club that was really vulnerable, and the trajectory of Munster over the next 2 seasons is really, really important for that club, as with their history, but also for Irish rugby. And I don't think he has helped it. He's kind of left it in a kind of a net position. And came in, did loads of really good things, and has left it in a bad.
I actually thought, here's potential next Irish coach. If things keep going well, maybe when Joe Schmidt leaves, that he had that kind of standing. The big thing that I heard from the players a lot and from the environment was his presence. It was really calm. Players were wary of him. He spoke so well. He just managed the whole ship really well. And then you have your coaches out in the field, and he was their leader, kind of the head person. And Axel and himself, when they were together, I love the way he handled that transition with Axel, that he didn't come in saying, well, I'm the boss now and I'm taking over. He let Axel be the head coach. He sat back. He managed that whole transition with him. They worked together, and you know, I said this before, the week before Axel passed away, I never saw him happier as regards coaching. He was really, really, and he didn't smile too much at the times. He grunted. Yeah. And we always slagged him about that. But he was comfortable with what happened. From being told, well, there's a director of rugby coming in, you're thinking, where's my job? What's going on? Is someone going to be, have I any control anymore? That whole thing went really smooth. So I think his approach to dealing with people was outstanding. So I do think he left him in the lurch a bit.
It's a pity he didn't do anything.
Well, so we'll
but
know.
he was the right man at the right place at the right time.
Absolutely, he was brilliant. And to be fair, he was brilliant. We'll know in a couple of weeks if Munster don't make knockout stages of Europe, what's going to come up? The debate over Rassie leaving, the injuries, Zebo leaving. You know,
Standard on a Mahoney contract talks.
Yeah, all that stuff will come up. Storm. You know, if they do well, Van Graan will say, well, the transition has been good.
Yeah, I'm sure our Ulster viewers and Connacht fans will be watching us this morning saying, well, you haven't mentioned them. Ulster back-to-back games at Queen's. They're at the Stoop this weekend. They are in a bad situation. Their pool, they pretty much have to take 6, 7, possibly 2 wins out of the back-to-back games of Queen's. Connacht riding high in the Challenge Cup. That's where they've shown their best form lately in the season, but unfortunately is now starting to unravel again. Gordon and Alan, it's been brilliant. We could have been here for another couple of hours. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Really enjoyable stuff. Okay, we're going to wrap up in a few minutes' time. Have another look at the back pages and the big stories that have been making the papers this morning. But last night, Paul Sharry of Westmeath, he was on the show on Off the Ball, and here's what he had his thoughts on the new talk on a potential 2-tier football championship.
Would a B All-Ireland be a motivation? Because if you look about now, if we were to have a B All-Ireland, if we were to split 16-16 straight up, start the season, Westmeath would probably fall into the second 16, but would be one of the favourites to win that. Yeah. Would that mean anything?
I don't know.
So you don't get to play Connolly, you don't get to play Donaghy.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe you get to be best of the rest and you start moving on.
It's basically just intermediate and senior, like, do you know what I mean? Like, I suppose it probably, like, no one likes change, as the old saying goes, do you know what I mean? But it might benefit in a way, like when you look at that, because like Westmeath's not the only kind of team that's struggling at the intercounty level. There's loads of counties there that struggle or wouldn't be able to stand on the pitch beside the top 5, like, you know, so there's probably a good bit of logic behind it. I'd personally rather the Champions League approach. I'd rather that one where it's kind of like divided into groups.
So almost an expanded Super 8 where it goes for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. It'd lead to more games, it'd lead to a bit more competitiveness, and it'd lead to a lot more teams seeing the end of the season, you know what I mean? Rather than it just being knockout, backdoor, knockout, see you after, that kind of event, you know?
Almost got a word in edgeways over Quinny.
Yeah, there is Paul Sharry, the Westmeath senior footballer, chatting about a possible 2-tier championship, which has emerged in the stories of the week again this week. We went through the papers a little bit earlier. We brought you through some of the back pages. So, and there's, well, Liverpool dominating over the course of the news cycle at the moment, because they managed to put 7 past Spartak Moscow in a huge game last night. But outside of Liverpool, where else are we looking? There's one or two interesting stories.
Yeah, I think we look at The Guardian because we've got David Conn, who's always excellent when it comes to the politics of football, when it comes to the economics of football. And there's really only one story at the moment when it comes to the politics of football, and it is Russia. And it's kind of the stuff that's kind of emanated from the Mutko story, really, who was clearly a very central figure in the state-sponsored doping regime, and the facts almost at this point that he was aware of what was going on with Grigory Rodchenkov and Sochi. So he's a central part of Russia 2018, and he is kind of emblematic of this notion that one Gary Lineker certainly shares, that forget what happened in Sochi. This is a new era. This is football.
Nothing to see here.
Exactly. That was Olympic sports. Those were athletes, because only athletes who partake in anything under the 5 rings are eligible to cheat, because footballers would never cheat. Footballers would never would never succumb to any sort of corrupt thinking, and that seems to have got Mutko off the hook here, that he's such a central figure.
Yeah, these are the tweets that Gary Lineker was putting out yesterday.
Exactly.
He's since removed them, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. So from Mutko we get into doping, and we get into this notion from Gary Lineker that he's had a conversation with many footballers, and none of them have heard of such goings on, which means omerta really, and actual doping by whatever means, I'm not sure. If the only advantage is to help with bloody pressing, then it will be a ridiculous risk for the most minimal advantage. And this is this very basic notion that often comes up whenever you talk about the tendencies for, say, an amateur GAA footballer to dope. But sure, the EPO won't help you kick better or whatever. Well, first of all, we're not saying that this is Lance Armstrong blood doping. Doping comes in many forms, many more minor forms. And second of all, like, what's the proof here that it doesn't help you to kick better or to kick the ball over the bar better? Because when it comes to, I don't know, the closing stages of my 5-a-side games, granted my fitness is terrible, whenever I'm tired, certainly my skills desert me. So this whole notion that, it's a skills game, therefore doping would not help you, is a complete ridiculous notion, and it is an incredibly naive notion from Gary Lineker there. As you say, I think he subsequently deleted the tweets. There are more there, which I think we might bring up on the screen in a moment or two, but his association with the politics of the World Cup in 2018 and this notion towards doping, which he says here to Matt Lawton.
He does roll back a little. He rolled back towards the end of the series of tweets that he was sending and admitted that he's probably a little naive. He's probably believing what he's believing because he so desperately wants it to be the case that doping is not an issue in football. And fair enough, he says he's never experienced it. He is from a different era. He says he's spoken to a number of players and it's never been a subject. But again, players aren't going to be broadcasting the fact that they're doping. If they are so, it'll never be systematic like it was in cycling, for example. It'll be done on an individual basis, as is probably the case in rugby as well, Quinny, that there's no club that's going to dope its players. But that doesn't mean there will not be individuals within a club squad that will go about it themselves.
There's no doubt about that. I know where Lineker is coming from. So when you watch soccer players, you think they're naturally kind of fit anyway. They're smaller guys, and they can. What effect will it? I have to be very careful what I say here now. First and foremost, what effect will it have? So visually, you won't see a lot. You don't see a lot in a cyclist either, but the long distance, the EPO, the oxygen levels, all that stuff has been proven that they benefit the cyclist. They can stay going longer. In rugby and contact sports, you can get bigger and stronger and more powerful, and obviously you have more of an impact then in the game. What he's trying to say is, I don't see the benefits of pressing harder or being able to be more agile. But then your point is very relevant, Eoin, as well, that it does,
the rest of your basic skills will stand up.
Fitness, yeah.
If you have the stamina to keep going, your concentration and your focus will be retained, so you're unlikely to make a mistake that could cost you the game in the last 10 minutes.
You can make that longer run. So,
and of course, rehabbing injuries as well is another element of it. I mean, who's to say that players aren't doping when they're trying to get back from an injury quicker? Say, for example, it's in a World Cup year, or for example, they are into the final 6 months of their contract and they desperately want to sign a new contract. Well, you'll do whatever it takes.
There's absolutely no doubt about it that those points are very relevant. And you think the money that's in football in the professional game is astronomical. So if a guy is trying to get back, I think he was naive a little bit, and maybe I sound.
He did admit as much.
Maybe I sound naive. I'm not being naive here to think that they wouldn't take it. Of course, and I'm sure many of them have. But visually, to look at someone in rugby, you see the bigger size, more powerful, more explosive. It probably has more of an. What he's trying to say, drugs would have more of an effect on other sports, but from a fitness point of view, if you can run faster, run longer, keep your concentration better, it has an effect. So
if you'd been told in 2002, or say for example you blew your shoulder out the year of the World Cup or in the run up to the World Cup as opposed to actually doing it against Argentina during the World Cup, and a doctor came up to you in a private capacity and said to you, I'll be able to cut your recovery period from 8 to 4 months, and that will mean that you will be able to play enough games to get into the squad for the World Cup. This does not have to be told to anybody else, just between you and me. It would be very tempting to do it, wouldn't it?
And it's illegal or legal?
No, it's illegal.
Well, we had the Fancy Bears League a couple of months ago, which came under TUEs, and it did come under legal substances that were taken in the 2010 World Cup. Argentina were particular users of this, that it was completely legal, but it is bending the rules a little bit. It is getting your therapeutic use exemptions, but how they are coming about, how legitimate your illness is or your ailment is, remains to be seen. And they're the sort of grey areas we're not kind of privy to. But the other thing, like that Lineker talks about, is, first of all, it doesn't really benefit football as much as cyclists. Completely irrelevant point. The other thing, though, is this idea of motive. Like, there might not be a motive for a footballer to use it. As long as sport is competitive, there is a motive to dope.
100%. And
where there's money involved.
All these players are taking recovery drinks, they're taking carbohydrate drinks, they're taking energy drinks beforehand. So why are they taking them? They're taking them
to enhance their performance.
They're taking them, like, if we eat carbohydrates and eat a good breakfast, you get energy from it. We need fuel in the body. So it's the same principle for a sports person. But what kind of fuel are you putting in? Is it illegal fuel? And there's no reason to suggest, and this naive approach to say, well, the game I love, he said in one of his tweets, and I don't want to believe it's happening. If it's happening in amateur sports, it's happening in soccer with the money, the vast amount of sums that make a player stronger, more powerful, quicker. And you know, if you look at a striker, if he can gain an extra little bit of a twitch or half a yard with pace, that's probably 10 goals a season more for him. Absolutely, and his price goes up, and there's life-changing money. So I would say there's definitely a lot more substance to this story, and I'd be very surprised if there wasn't doping in soccer. Now, systematic doping, I don't know, but there's definitely, and it's the same in rugby. There's doping in rugby. There's no doubt about it. I don't know. I have like Lineker. I haven't.
We don't have the evidence.
Yeah.
We don't have the whistleblower that we probably need, and that's where so much of the information is coming in other sports.
I don't know what the testing is in the soccer, but I'm sure it's probably more stringent, and they probably have more money to and more resources. The resources have changed in the rugby over the last number of years. Even when I was playing, you tested out a competition. You're tested during the summer. I was away in a hotel in Cork one time in the off season. People arrived at the hotel to test me. You've got to let people know all that kind of stuff. So you can imagine in soccer, it's
rigorous.
But does the testing work is obviously the next step, and with the money that's in football, you'd imagine the technology is beyond the testers at this point, which is a completely different story. We will go down a rabbit hole.
We're at the top end of medical science, and it can happen, I'm sure.
But the thrust of David Kahn's piece basically is Vitaly Mutko, who a lot of people who've been tuned into this will know exactly who this guy is. For anybody who isn't, though, he is who WADA was accused of being complicit in the independent report commissioned that he was complicit in the doping conspiracy, the state-run doping conspiracy, but he remains head of the 2018 World Cup. So that is the collusion here, and of course Gary Lineker's idea on doping it goes parallel to that a little bit. So it's two very interesting things, and Lineker's role in this, in my view, is fascinating. It is fascinating that a guy can be so outspoken against FIFA and then say, oh no, I believe they're a whole new organisation, when there is a clear link. A man who is head of this event, who was, we're told by WADA, was complicit in a state-run doping conspiracy. A guy
who's been banned from the Olympic movement for 10 years, and there he is standing alongside the chief of FIFA and in front of the world, shoulder to shoulder, at the World Cup draw in Moscow a week ago, and Gary Lineker doesn't think that there's an obvious link between the two. Exactly.
Lineker might be right that FIFA has changed, but if Mutko was involved, FIFA have changed for the worst. So I think it's anybody who's calling Lineker out as a hypocrite is completely in their right at the moment. I would be baffled if Lineker was correct in his urge that FIFA might have changed for the better, because it's very, very unclear.
Show me the evidence. Where's the evidence for it?
I think the evidence is going in the opposite direction.
Thanks a million for that, Eoin. On Off the Ball tonight, we have a studio piece involving Kevin Caban and Shay Given, where Shay's going to be chatting about his new book, Any Given Sunday. Here is Shay's thoughts on the particular portion of his international career that revolved around the tenure of Steve Staunton as Irish manager.
I don't know. I feel for Steve, because I mentioned this in the book. Steve gone from one of the most decorated players play for Ireland. Then he has a bit of a rough patch as a manager, and is dressed as puppets in the front of the national newspaper. You know what I mean? It's just you're either brilliant in this country or you're rubbish. There's no in between, it seems like, you know. And
you mentioned though as well with Staunton, just going off on that tangent quickly, that the lines were sort of blurred as well for the players. That here's a guy who you spent a lot of time sneaking out the back windows with when you're out in Portmarnock and that, and now suddenly he's the boss. Yeah. He's the gaffer. Yeah. That for the players, that maybe the lines were blurred as well.
I don't think they were blurred as much. There was definitely respect there. Do you know what I mean? There was no. I don't think there was any blurriness. I think it's always difficult. I think when you play with someone and then the manager, you know. But I still really want them to do well. What I do say in the book about Stan, I felt that he tried to blood too many young players too soon, in a sense. You know, if he had a long-term contract and a long-term plan, you know, if the FAI said to him, you know, you've got the next 6 years to, you know, implement this plan, and, you know, we might not qualify for the next couple, but, you know, the long-term future is these young lads coming through. But, you know, well, I don't know if it's the media in this country or media in every country, you know, it's all about results and stuff, and the results didn't go well, and then it was like, you know, get them out or whatever, and some of these young players aren't good enough, and I don't know, I just felt it was harshly treated. But, you know, the guys who wrote the stories will say, well, these were terrible, or whatever, the results weren't good enough. So I don't know. I just feel like to go from, as I say, one of my heroes growing up as an Irish fan, to be sort of slagged off so badly then as a manager. He was only trying to do his best. He wasn't, you know, having bad results on purpose. I know that's the nature of the game, but still, I think this can be cutting at times.
Yeah, there's probably a whole different conversation about whether he ever should have been given the job at that stage of his career in the first place.
Yeah, Shay Given talking about the time that Steve Staunton was in charge of the Republic of Ireland. Final thoughts, lads. That's something actually that's crossed my mind many times since Steve Staunton lost the job as Ireland manager, is the incredible damage to his legacy as a player. If he had never set foot in that job, he would be one of the greatest players of all time, one of the best we've ever produced, a man who reached the century caps, captained us at a World Cup. Where for the vast majority of Irish fans, when they think Steve Staunton, they don't think Centurion, they think terrible 18 months as Ireland manager. It's really sad.
It's shocking, really. We do that as a nation, though, don't we? We kind of turn on our sports people at times. It's totally wrong, but that's the perception. And you think, was he cut out for the manager's role?
Yeah, well, as Nathan said at the end of that piece, the debate is whether he should ever have taken it. But if you put yourself in Steve Staunton's shoes, at the very beginning of your managerial career, you're offered the Ireland job. Absolutely. You might think, I may never get this again. This is my one and only opportunity to manage Ireland. Only a fool would say no.
Yeah, like, as in the whole idea of being a sports person is taking risks, it is being ballsy, and
believing in yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And for somebody who would have the belief of being a Centurion, as you say, that was kind of an open goal. You take that without a shadow of a doubt. Also, at the outset, he looked at all the characters around him, he looked at the support he was supposed to have, and he's like, I've got some really good footballing brains around me, this couldn't possibly go wrong. And then suddenly we're in Cyprus and everybody's like, what the hell has just happened?
A few of you have been in touch with us this morning on OTB AM. Peter on Periscope. As soon as Liverpool come up against a decent team, they'll come up short. That's on the back of Liverpool's big win last night, so they stroll into the knockout stages of the Champions League as group winners. No on Periscope. Liverpool defence is an issue, but it's more the way Liverpool play That's why they concede such soft goals. Another viewer, my money's on Leinster/Munster wins back-to-back. D'Arcy, well, I've lost that one there. Good bit of praise for Gordon and his pieces in the Times every week. Quick one, Quinny, you're not really into your predictions, but are you looking at, Munster have to win. That game's live, 7:45 on Off the Ball Saturday evening. Keith Wood and Liam Tolan will be alongside myself in Thomond Park. Leinster don't necessarily have to win.
They don't. They have a bit of wriggle room there. I think Munster will probably
do whatever
the
it
results,
takes.
yeah.
Like a 6-5, they take it.
To take any kind of a win. I think it's just important that they'll probably be better the week after. It's a really difficult period for coming up from, and if they start off with a bad result, I think it's they're on the back foot. I think they might get the result. I think Ulster going to Quins is a very tricky game from.
Have to take something from it, don't they?
They've got to get something. When Ulster throw caution to the wind a little bit.
As they often do away from home.
Yeah, they do sometimes. They were heavily beaten in La Rochelle, which La Rochelle are a very powerful side. But
having played some decent rugby in the game and scored a couple of tries and looked like they could be competitive, that's what they have to do with this too.
And there's rumblings of unhappiness within the squad up there. So that's a tough one from. I don't think they'll win in Quins. And part of me thinks it's just so hard to split Leinster and Exeter. Exeter are so powerful at home. They're a great side, great spirit, home crowd, small compact stadium in Sandy Park. I think it could be tricky for that one for Leinster. But I thought that going to Glasgow as well, and they got a bonus point win, they were outstanding. So it's hard, it's just so hard to call that one. I fancy Exeter to just sneak it. Maybe
the home team.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me.
Back-to-back
games. It wouldn't surprise me the slightest if Leinster go on there and win. But I just think maybe they're so difficult at home. Exeter might just sneak that one.
Okay, well, we'll have the return game, the game against Exeter Chiefs, live from the Aviva Stadium next Saturday afternoon. We're doing the whole show from the Aviva, so that's something to look forward to. I think it's a 3:15 kick-off. You would have seen Gordon D'Arcy in with us over the course of the morning. He was around to talk to us about a raffle that the Don Bosco charity are doing as they provide safe homes for over 30 children and young adults who can't live in their own home and have had to be taken into care. Just a reminder, those tickets, they're half price at the moment. They're only €10. You can get 3 for 20 or you can get 10 for €50. So bring the cost down to a £5 a ticket if you so wish. To enter that draw, either text the word donate to 087 720 3434 and you'll receive a donation link for the raffle, or you can go straight to gofundme.com/DBCBA. Coming up on tonight's show, well, there's an awful lot to get through because Nathan's going to be in studio presenting. He'll have a chat with John Giles. Shay Given, as we've already been mentioned, will be in studio to chat with Kevin, and Richard Dunn and Graham Hunter will be on the football show. Also this evening we have our Off the Ball Roadshow at Heineken at the Stella Theatre, exclusive off-air event. There were only 200 tickets released for this event. Ger and Brian O'Driscoll are presenting it. Keith Wood will be there, and Warren Gatland, Lions and Wales coach. So an awful lot for them to discuss. Off the Ball, OTB AM is back tomorrow morning from 7:45 AM. Adrian will be in the hot seat alongside Eoin. The best bits from Brian O'Driscoll, Woody and Warren Gatland from the Roadshow tonight. Nathan and Kevin on the weekend's football. And of course, how could we forget the bariometer? Can't wait. Thanks a million for watching this morning. We'll speak to you soon.